brothers, I taught about 50 bushes. One of my brothers, we got school coming up now. We cut school coming up named after my mother's day.
Congratulations.
So, you know, the one church, one kid,
Yeah.
one church with all this and that. It would be nice if all of the businesses would take the kids, or take at least one or two, and teach them, and get them off the street. And coming out of jail, when the person that did their time, they can't get a job. That's the problem.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I totally agree with you. By the way, the one church, one child program started in Florida, and it's basically what I was trying to describe, where people churches would adopt a child that was in the foster care system so that they could find a loving home on a permanent basis. And now that's spread across the country. That approach is part of the answer. If you believe in limited government, like I do, where government should not grow, its income shouldn't grow faster than personal income, we need to fill the void with loving hearts. We need to fill the void, as we always have as a nation, with programs that, like One Church, One Child, and many others, where people are engaged to define their success by how they help others. As it relates to this issue of training and the skills gap, because that's what exists. The skills gap has actually grown, even though we spend ginormous sums of money on education and job training. There are 3 million jobs that are unfilled because they're not people that have the skills to fill them. Part of that's cultural, where people, you know, it's if you're a welder or a butcher or a truck driver, or nurses are a little different because it requires a 4-year degree, or electrician, where those are not apparently in society as high a value as a 4-year degree major that's unemployed. And the simple fact is there are jobs that could be filled in every part of this country that would be meaningful jobs that would allow you to live an independent life, but part of its culture, part of it is our inability of our K-12 education system and our college system to adapt to these new realities. And I think moving back to a more career-oriented education system where there's more offerings for the kind of jobs that you're talking about is definitely part of that. And some states do that well. Some states don't do it. Like Florida, we haven't been as focused on the career orientation. Now they're starting to do it. But Washington doesn't do it well at all. Washington does it as, you know, the training programs that we have. I think we have more than 50 training programs. There are more people working, it seems to me, in these, you know, as bureaucrats to administer the programs than the benefits, you know, that are getting the benefits. So shifting back to more outcome-based results, which typically is done better at the local and state level than Washington, D.C., I think is the better path to go. Thank you for being here. Yes, ma'am.
I've always felt safe in my country. I don't feel safe anymore. What are you going to do to make that happen?
So the question is that she's always felt safe in the country, and now she doesn't feel as safe. And I hear that a lot. All you have to do is watch television and see these graphic beheadings, these barbarians, basically, that we can't even call them for what they are. This is Islamic terrorism. They want to destroy Western civilization. So the first thing I think the next president has to do is recognize it for what it is. It's a threat to Western civilization. It's a serious threat, and we need to be in it for the long haul. We can't just be in it temporarily and push back, because what we've seen is these voids are filled. The second thing I'd say is we can't do it alone. We're not the world's policeman. The price of that is too high, and the effect of it is too low. We need to engage in the world to recreate the relationships that create a more peaceful world. As it relates to ISIS, for example, that means helping the Iraqi military rebuild itself. It was fragile, but it was much stronger than it was today when Barack Obama was elected President of the United States. When he pulled back completely, both politically, diplomatically, and militarily, Iraq crumbled, and the void was filled. And the blood and treasure of a lot of people, a lot of men and young men, particularly in the military, was lost in Fallujah and Ramadi now has been taken over, at least in the case of Mosul and Ramadi, by ISIS. We need to establish a strategy, which we don't have, and we need to have the long-haul view of taking this threat out and then staying vigilant over the long haul. Name a country where our relationship today is better than it was the day that Barack Obama was sworn in as President of the United States. I can think of two. Cuba. You win the... Cuba's one, and Iran. The relationships with Canada, it's almost unimaginable to imagine how you could mess up a relationship with your largest trading partner and your closest counterpart, in life in terms of culture and everything. The relationship is strained. The relationships are strained in the Americas for sure. It's Israel. The relationship is strained beyond belief. Egypt, a country that has been part of a coalition that has created security in the world, are now, no longer understand where the United States stands. You go across the world, and what you see is we're not as dependable as we once were, and our enemies don't fear us anymore. Now, I'm not advocating war here. What I'm advocating is the traditional United States position of leadership in the world, where we lead. We don't lead from behind. We don't talk about things. We create certainty. We develop coalitions. And in the case of these threats of terror, we deal with it in a comprehensive, strategic way, and we take them out over the long haul. We can do this. This is not the greatest challenge our country faces. And if we don't do it, we'll see homegrown terrorism. This is, the reports are that there are a couple of hundred ISIS fighters that are American citizens. You don't stamp caliphate of ISIS when you enter their territory. We don't know where they necessarily are. So defending the homeland, protecting the homeland, and being strong as it relates to foreign policy is part of this. The final thing I'd say is we got to restore the cuts in the sequester. The sequester cuts have been devastating to the military, and they're automatic. And they'll stay automatic unless the next president restores those cuts and restores the strongest, best trained, most supported military in the world, including our veterans. If we do that, I think people will know that we have their back, that we're serious as a leader, and we can deal with this issue.
I think we should.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian and a Mennonite, and something that I feel called to as part of my faith is to prepare for the poor and marginalized in our country. And a case that a lot of people here are probably familiar with, but I'm not sure that you have heard anything about, is a Mennonite pastor in Iowa City, 45 minutes away from here.
I just left there.
Right. I did too. Was deported in March, despite having children who are citizens and a long track record of being here and being a pastor and ministering to the community in Iowa City. I know that in the past you have kind of talked about supporting some kinds of immigration reform, and yet especially within the Republican Party, but even just kind of overall, that's been a really contentious issue. So
Apparently, yeah.
Right.
I've been told that.
Kind of what you would do as a presidential candidate and as president to kind of navigate that territory of a
Sure.
issue and also try to keep families together.
Great question. In fact, it's a question that goes to, first of all, a policy that is important for high sustained economic growth. We have a broken immigration system that's holding us back from the kind of growth that we need, and I'll talk about that. But it's also a question of authenticity and genuineness and being who you are, having a compass that points north. And what I've learned in my political life and just being Jeb is that you can't bend with the wind. So to answer the political question, I believe what I believe, and I believe in comprehensive immigration reform because I know that it will help us create high sustained economic growth where more people can earn success. And so because people disagree with me in my own party, not everybody, trust me, but a lot of people that have a differing view, the natural inclination, and we see it with Hillary Clinton doing the same thing on the left, and we see candidates that had views that are kind of moving away from them on our side. It's not in my nature to do that. So let me explain what I do believe. I believe that we need to secure the border. First and foremost, we need to secure the border. Coming here legally should be easier than coming here illegally. That should be the first step. Coming here with a legal visa doesn't mean that you stay permanently. 40% of the illegal immigrants that come to this country stay. They come legally and they just stay. A great nation ought to be able to know where those folks are. There's all sorts of reasons why that's the case. And we ought to have a system where the rule of law applies. We need an E-Verify system. We need a lot of things to create an environment where people are confident that our legal system is working and that we're containing the number of people that come illegally. But we shouldn't stop there. There are kids that are U.S. citizens whose parents are here illegally, and the fact that some of them showed up at my kickoff to protest, I think we ought to deal with DREAM Act kids, that if they've been here for an extended period of time, they have no contact to their other countries, they ought to be able to earn citizenship. And their parents over time, if they pay a fine, if they work, if they don't receive government assistance, if they learn English over and they get a provisional work permit, over a period of time they can get legal status. But it should be earned. It's not amnesty when you do it that way. We need to expand the number of people that can help us grow economically. So we should expand the number of economic immigrants and narrow the number of people that come by family. I agree with you that separating family is not an American value, but I think I can tell you we're the only country in the world where family petitioning, which is part of our legal immigration system, is defined by spouse, minor children. Every country has that. Adult siblings and adult parents. And we've had it since the early 1960s. And the net effect is family petitioning is about 80 to 85% of all legal immigration. Canada, with one-tenth of our population, has more economic immigrants. So the shortages in the skilled jobs and others that exist in Canada are filled in a strategic way based on need. They have more economic immigrants because they have the narrow definition of family. So I would narrow the number of people coming by family, eliminate the quota system, and then have a strategy that brings people in that can create economic activity. Imagine having the possibility, anybody here a football fan? Having the Bears, okay, college, can't do that. This is a pro, I'm giving you a pro analogy, so that won't work. Imagine having the first 500,000 first-round draft picks every year, because the promise of America could bring the best and the brightest that would add value to our country and create opportunities for all of us. So I'm for comprehensive reform because I think it's part of who we are as a nation. It's part of our success. It's also part of the way that we could create high sustained economic growth. The final thing I'd say gets back to the question of education. The reason why America is so successful in immigration is that our national identity is based on a set of values, a set of shared values. And the minute we stop sharing those values, we break up in our disparate parts. And it doesn't work that well when we do that. So reestablishing what those shared values are, and so when people come newly arrived, they should embrace those. They should embrace those values just as native-born Americans have to, which leads me to believe that we need much more robust civic education, an appreciation of our culture, our heritage, our history, our Constitution. Coming here and living here, I know you feel this, is the greatest privilege of any human being. What a blessing to live in the United States. And everybody that lives here should share that joy, that belief that we're an extraordinary country. And if you look at our civics courses and social studies here in Washington, I promise you, if you haven't seen your 8th grade civics social studies courses about who we are as a nation, you'd be surprised. We need to restore a much more robust, rich appreciation of our past. And immigrants will embrace that, I promise you. They will embrace that. And when they do, we'll be a lot better off. Final thing I'll say about this is way too long of an answer in Washington, Iowa about immigration, but the final thing I'll say is the president has had the opportunity to do his version of what I just described. He could have done it his first 2 years. He promised it, in fact, and he didn't do it because he wants to use this as a political issue. He likes this as a wedge issue. He thinks Democrats win by not solving this. There's some indication that he might be right about that. So he doesn't want to solve this, and the reason, and it's proven by the fact that instead of going to Congress and doing what presidents used to do, which is find consensus, find bipartisan approaches, have humility to be able to have give and take, to be able to get to a point where you get to a win-win. Instead of doing that, he's using executive order authorities that he doesn't have, Constitution doesn't grant him. He's doing this as it relates to the DREAM Act kids in an unconstitutional fashion, and the courts will prove me right. And it creates a more poisonous environment rather than an environment where we can get things done. So whether it's taxes or regulation or immigration or an energy policy or ultimately getting to the point where we fix our entitlement challenges that are going to overwhelm the next generation, we need a president that stops using power he doesn't have in the Constitution and starts with humility to work with Congress to start fixing these things the way we used to do it. Okay. Yes, sir.
One more question. You had indicated that the dysfunction is in Washington, D.C. and not Washington, Iowa.
I hope it's not here.
Well,
I just got here.
I think my point is you also indicated that the highest per capita income is in Washington, D.C. And it seems like they're the ones that would have to vote on any changes to get it to trickle down to Washington, Iowa. And that would be the main thing you would want to accomplish. How do you do that? It seems like if they're up there for personal gain, there's no change, and they're not going to vote on any changes that would allow that to trickle down.
Great question. So in Florida, we have, when I was governor, working with the legislature, we created lobbying reform where you couldn't take gifts, elected officials couldn't take gifts from lobbyists. We had more disclosure than Washington has. The reason we have government in the sunshine in Florida, not just because it's a sunny day most of the time. It's because we tried to create transparency. I reduced the workforce in state government by 13,000, 11% fewer workers in 8 years. There's ways that you can shift power away from Washington by executive power. I think we need procurement reform where you don't have to lobby up to be able to get a contract from government. We need to create greater transparency, greater simplicity. The 10th Amendment is a pretty powerful part of our Bill of Rights. And the 10th Amendment's been trampled on, not just under President Obama's time, but just in increments without a debate. We've shifted power to Washington for things that the founders never envisioned to be done. So using the power to shift back as it relates to granting waivers for Medicaid, for how you regulate nursing homes, how you build roads, how you prioritize the infrastructure, shifting power back as it relates to education. We have, when I was governor, we had, I think, 300 people in our Department of Education. Just to put it in perspective, I don't know how many people work in the Department of Education here in Iowa, but we had 300. We got about 10% of our money for the K-12 budget from Washington, but 80% of those 300 people were filling out forms to comply with that 10%. Shift power back. They don't have to have this power. And then think about why are wages significantly higher in government than they are in the private sector? I don't think it was always that way. I don't think that existed 20 years ago. We've allowed this to happen. And it's gotten worse in the last few years because of the dramatic increase in the regulatory power of these agencies. You can put men and women that believe that there ought to be an economic impact on regulations. You can reform how we procure. You can have career civil service reform. When I was governor, we eliminated career civil service protections to the extent that if you were completely negligent in your job, you could get fired. Amen. Now, I don't think that's... You look at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington, where they were given bonuses for taking people off the waiting list. One would have assumed that meant that they got the care. Instead, what it meant was that they just got rid of the waiting list. And people who served our country in uniform suffered because they didn't get care. In fact, people died. That kind of system, if you had a president that said, enough of this, this is not America, this is not how we act, they should have fired those people immediately. And very few of them got fired. And you go across the spectrum, OPM, now you got me going, man. Oh, the Office of Personnel Management, this is the agency that handles all the employment. Their Inspector General, in the last 6 months, as I've read in the papers, and you have as well, said that if they don't have better firewalls, better cyber protection, that there's going to be a problem. Well, lo and behold, apparently the Chinese found how to get through that firewall, and now they have the records of a lot of people. This guy goes, or this woman who's the head of this goes to testify to Congress and says she can't give can't give anybody any answers about whether or not the CIA employees that might be covert are part of that file that the Chinese have. This is serious stuff. Shrinking government and making it be more effective has to be the duty of the next President of the United States. And there are a lot of people that understand this, but very few people have done it like I have as governor of the state of Florida. Hope that answers your question. And thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.